Welcome to this video on optimizing and troubleshooting workflows inside of BuildShip. So in this video, we're going to talk about some different key ideas on how to optimize and make our nodes more efficient. We're going to talk about troubleshooting some common ideas, and then we're going to jump into the back end of BuildShip, and I'm going to walk you through a couple different scenarios that may happen that we can figure out how to troubleshoot and check the logs and all of those kind of things. So let's dive right in. We're going to start with performance optimization. So here are some key strategies that we can use to do that. First thing we want to look at is optimizing our node performance, right? So each node in the workflow is going to perform a specific task. So we want to make sure that we're checking out the settings and making sure that they're configured to be optimized. So for example, if a node is processing large amounts of data, we want to check to see if we can reduce any unnecessary steps or streamline any of the processes. We want to make any adjustments to the parameters, such as timeouts, batch sizes, and we want to make sure that we're matching the workload that's coming through. Next thing we want to look at is making sure that we have efficient data flow. So we want to ensure that the data that's passed between the nodes is in the most efficient format. We want to remove any kind of redundancies or any kind of data transformations. And we want to make sure that we only pass the data that is absolutely necessary. So we can use caching, we can use temporary storage, or we could use other modes like that to be able to speed up those repeated operations. Next thing we want to look at is resource allocation. So we want to make sure that we allocate enough of the resources for the tasks that are computationally heavy. So for example, when we're doing AI calls, there's going to be different parameters that we want to make sure we have set the right way so that we get all of the data that we need. If we have a low amount of tokens that we're expecting, but we're getting a ton of data to write a blog article, we're not going to get the output that we're desiring. And then we also want to consider that we schedule less critical tasks during off-peak hours if possible. The last thing we want to think about is continuous learning and feedback. So we want to make sure that we implement feedback loops so the workflow can actually learn from its performance. And we can look at example log metrics and that we can make sure that we review those for the best optimal performance. Let's jump into some different error codes that you might see as you're building out the different nodes inside of BuildShip. One of the first errors that you might see is like a data mismatch error. So sometimes what can happen is the nodes may receive data in an unexpected format. So for example, if you're trying to send, a node is expecting like a JSON file, for example, and it's coming through as a string, it's going to throw an error asking for the right type of information so it can process it in the right way. So the solution to that is to check and make sure that the data mappings between nodes is correct. And you want to make sure that we use validation steps to ensure that the data meets the expected format before it's passed on. So as an example of that, in our WordPress poster that we built, we have a blog content that's created by an OpenAI node, and we're passing it through another node that actually formats it in HTML so that when it gets posted to WordPress, it's in the right format and it looks clean on the other end. Another thing that we may run into are timeouts and delays. So a node may take too long to execute, causing a timeout error. So one of the things that we can do in that case is review the performance metrics, and we want to make sure that we could potentially increase the timeout limit or optimize the node's processing logic. So sometimes it's just running. If we're waiting for like a specific AI model, maybe it takes too long and it times out before it really has an opportunity to produce the result that we're looking for. So we want to make sure that we're aware of that. And if it's going to take a longer time, we may want to open up that gap of the timeouts so that it has the time to produce the content that we're looking for. Another issue we could run into are connection failures. So different things like API calls, they may fail due to some connectivity issues. Maybe there's a password or a username that's wrong. Maybe it's the wrong URL. Something like that could cause connection issues, or maybe a server's down. And so if there's some issue, it's going to let you know that there's something that needs to be fixed. So the solution to that is going to be able to check your API keys. You want to make sure that the network settings are correct. You want to make sure that the external services are actually available. Sometimes different software programs will go down for a little bit. If it's down, obviously it's not going to be able to connect. So making sure that the program and the softwares are up, and we want to make sure that we implement a retry mechanism for some of these connections. So if it doesn't work the first time, we can retry it so it doesn't get stuck and fail at that node. Another issue we run into is it may have an unexpected output. So maybe the output from the node isn't what we expected. So we can revisit the configuration and look at the transformation logic and then test each node individually to see if we can isolate where the problem is and make sure that it's getting the right output that is desired. And then finally, there's error propagation. So this is an area where one node may cause issues in another node. So if one node is causing an error and it passes along data into the next node, that node might automatically have an error because it's not getting any kind of data from the node that had the error in the first place. So it can continue to be like a waterfall effect. So a solution to that is to implement error handling nodes that can catch those errors and then correct them or swiftly terminate the process. This is going to prevent a single error from crashing the entire workflow. So here are some expert tips to keep your workflows optimized and running smoothly. So the first thing we can do is have some modular testing. So we can break down the workflow into small testable modules so it's easier to pinpoint the issues and make the debug simpler. We can periodically do regular reviews and just make sure that we're watching the performance, check the logs, look at any resource usage, and look for any anomalies or trends that may suggest that we might need to adjust something. Next, we got human in the loop. This is one of my favorites. Don't be afraid to incorporate manual checks. Sometimes you need a human to just check and review the logs and make sure that we're catching the issues quickly. You don't want to have an issue continue to build on itself when just a quick human check will mitigate that. Documentation and updates. So we want to make sure that we keep documentation for our workflows updated. So if we change it to a setting, if we change any kind of data flow, we want to make sure that we note these changes and make sure that we update the workflow on a regular basis based on any kind of news insights or evolving needs. Community engagement. Join the BuildShip community on Discord or YouTube. So sharing your experiences and learning from others in a community environment is going to allow you to provide new ideas for optimization and troubleshooting. All right, let's dive into the back end. I'm going to show you a couple different things. All right, we're in the back end. I'm going to show you different ways that we can optimize the different nodes. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we have the proper prompts and everything like that inside of each of the prompt areas, right? And then we want to look at the model that we're using and then the max tokens when it comes to an AI node. So this is going to be your OpenAI, your Anthropic, Claude, Perplexity, any of those kind of things. They should have some advanced settings that you can choose the model, look at the tokens that may be needed, and the temperature is really just going to be the creativity of the AI model. But you want to adjust these and make sure that we have enough max tokens to process all of the information that we need. And also that if we don't need as many tokens, we do want to have, bring that number down so that we're not overutilizing our tokens as well. We want to make sure that we have the right variables in each spot. So we want to be pulling from the right nodes and the right information. And we want to make sure that there's no redundancies. So for example, if I had one AI node that created the title, and then another AI node that would create the description, and then another AI node that would create the blog content, and then another AI node that would create the meta title, and then another one that would create a meta description, there's way too many pieces in there that you're going to be utilizing that is unnecessary. When we can have just one node that breaks out the content into the title, the description, and the blog content, then you only need to have one API call handle all of that stuff for you. Now, if you're building out really, really long and huge articles, you might want to break it up in a couple different nodes based on per section, depending on what you're doing. It might make sense in some cases. You just want to evaluate that and make sure you're not being redundant. But if you have a node that creates a blog title and then another node that creates a meta title, see if there's anything that you can do to combine the two to have that one node do both things for you. This is another example of looking at a Flux image generator. So again, you want to choose the right model. You want to make sure you have the right prompt in there and make sure that you play with the prompt to get it right and get it all dialed in. You want to make sure that you have all of the information that you may need. So image size, do you have different image sizes that you're looking for? If you've got multiple image sizes that you're going to need, you could do an if and switch statement where, so for example, you could do a switch or you could do a parallel where it would walk you through different options based on the conditions that you set for it. And if you're not sure what a lot of this stuff means, if you give you a little description on the side and tells you what it means. So obviously this is the URL of the image to generate an image. So the strength is going to be the strength of the initial image. So higher strength values are going to be better for this model. It gives you the default value, things like that. So as you look at each thing, you can click on it, and it'll give you some information and some guidance that you can follow. So I would, like, for example, this is the number of images. If you have 10 images, that's going to take up a lot of time. So you want to make sure that you're using the correct models, using the correct amount of images, using all of the right settings so that you can be as optimized as possible. All right, we're going to run through a couple different scenarios. I've intentionally made some mistakes throughout some of these nodes so that we can see kind of some of the errors that are popping up that you might see on a regular basis. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to run a test on the whole flow, and then we'll see as soon as the red squares pop up where the errors are. So that's a good one. All right, so we want to see where this error went. So we're going to go up to the flow here, and we're going to go to that node, which is the create a blog content. And so it's saying that you exceeded our current quota. Please check the plan and billing details. So what that means is that something is not, either some money is run out on your OpenAI account, or potentially you've gone over your quota for the API codes. So usually it's a billing issue. So you just got to go to OpenAI, make sure that the right API key is connected, make sure that there's credits on there, that kind of thing. If we go down to the next one, broke down. So cannot read properties of undefined. So basically, this is what I was talking about earlier with the cascading errors, right? So you got an error here, so it didn't create anything. It came up as undefined. And so this node was pulling in an undefined variable, and it doesn't know what to do with it. There's nothing to convert. So in that case, it threw another error. And even though I put on fail ignore, because of the two errors, it just killed the workflow. So we can fix all of that. If we fix this node, it'll fix this node. So I'm going to pause it real quick. All right, so I updated the key and made sure everything was right, everything was good. We'll run the test flow again. And we'll see what happens. So the other area that you can see if you want to dive a little bit deeper is you can go into the logs, like we mentioned earlier, and it'll show you all the specifics on it. So right now it's trying to create the blog. That should be good, and then you'll see that this node should be good as well, because that was only an error because of the error that came on this one. And if we can see, those were good, and it just got errors on all of the other three. So we'll go into this one, the Flux node. API request failed with status 401. So that's probably a key with something with, it couldn't get the API request. So maybe there's a wrong key, maybe the server's down, but something was going wrong. So the first thing I would do is check to make sure that the right key is set up. And I know that's what it was. So make sure the right key is set up, and then it would work. If we go down to the next node, next thing we'll check is this upload image to WordPress node, and it's saying that the image path is undefined. So what that's saying is this Flux node didn't spit out an image that could be uploaded to WordPress. So because there was an error here, it didn't have an image to spit out. So you can look at this node, and so it had nothing to spit out. So if you go into the logs here, you can actually see. So this says complete, but that's because I went through and completed the whole node, the whole work. I show the errors inside of the log. So you can see there's error here, error here. And it'll tell you this property must be a valid JSON object. Yeah, so that's the error that it's saying. So here, the source property must be a valid JSON object. We can dive in a little bit deeper. Yep. So it's not getting the correct format for it to actually pass along. So it's saying there's an error because that format isn't correct. It didn't have an image URL to pass along. So the image path was undefined. So it couldn't upload anything into WordPress, and so it threw an error. So if we fix this, give me 1 second, we'll see what happens here. I'm going to run the test flow again. This error should be fixed. I updated the key to make sure it was the right one. And I'm just trying to go through the different steps so you can see the different potential errors that might happen. And you can do it this way, or you could actually test it on each individual node individually. Okay, we can see that it worked on this node, so that's all good. But the other two are still not working. So we'll go to this one. And so it said it failed to upload the image because of an unknown email address. So this is saying that the username is not correct. So I got to go in here and double check and make sure that their username is correct. And then if we go to the last one, HTTP error status 404. If you want to see what that means, you can go click here, and it's saying we need to check if the URL is correct. So the endpoint that we're trying to send to WordPress is not correct. So there's probably an error in the URL that we're trying to send over there. Those are a few scenarios that we walked through to see where there might be some errors throughout the node and the workflow. So you can also reach out to support if there's any issues. And the other thing, I mentioned you could use like AI to create a node. If you have like a specific use case, you can describe what you want the node to do. A lot of times if you do that, you do want to check and make sure that it's actually working the right way, especially if you're doing something like that. A lot of times what I'll have to do is I'll go into the code, and then I will copy the code, and I will go to like Claude or ChatGPT, and I will say, hey, this is the code that I have. This is the error that I'm getting. Can you tell me how to fix it? And then usually it'll update the code. You can copy it, paste it in here, and test it out that way. So that's a nice little trick. If you don't know how to code, or you don't know what you're doing in that respect, you can use AI to actually help you with the coding aspect of it as well. All right, to recap, we covered how to optimize your AI workflows by ensuring efficient node performance, data flow, and resource allocation. We also looked at how to monitor your workflows using the BuildShip's dashboard and the log analysis tools. We reviewed some of the common issues, and we also came up with some troubleshooting tips as you're working through your nodes. So with these tools and best practices, you'll be able to keep your workflows running smoothly and adapt to any changes that may come your way. So thank you for joining this session, and I look forward to talking to you soon.